1 year and 57 episodes in, and this might just be the first one in which we actually talk about crime.
This is Partners in Crime with Adam Croft and Robert Dawes.
Welcome back to another episode of Partners in Crime.
Yes.
We got there in the end.
We did.
I spent the last 10 minutes or so trying to mess around with my microphone stand, which seized and wouldn't let me place my mic where I wanted it.
And I watched.
You
absolutely helpless.
You did. And you learned your lines?
I didn't learn my lines, actually. I sort of acted as if I was learning my lines, but none of them actually went in. Well, here we are, fresh as a daisy. It was only the day before yesterday that we were here doing last week's one. So we're really on it at the moment.
Well, last week's one did go out this week. Technically, it went out on Sunday night. So
did it?
Yeah.
Right.
So it's not too bad. We're getting there in the end. We mentioned on last week's show it was a London Book Fair special. If you haven't listened to that, do go back and listen to it. And our show notes writer, if I can get my words out, revealed herself to the world. And we're not naming her. She hasn't named herself, but we had a little competition, didn't we?
Well, you set up a competition,
yes. And we said that we should, listeners, that's you, should come up with some kind of mysterious name for her, because we can't just keep calling her the show notes writer. And we've had 4 suggestions in on Facebook, both on the Facebook page and the Partners in Crime Facebook group. Marion Todd suggested the Scribester. Helen Weir suggested Picto, which is an anagram for Partners in Crime Tidbit Officiator. Jay Gill suggested we should call her Moriarty. That's quite crimey, I like that. And Rosemary Valdez suggested Doctor Strange.
Well, that's great, aren't they?
And she is rather strange, so not Rosemary, I mean the show notes writer. Sorry, Rosemary, I didn't mean you.
There are 4 excellent suggestions. Are we keeping the competition open for any others who are inspired by those 4 excellent suggestions? Yeah,
we can keep it open for another week or so. As you say, it's only been open for a couple of days as we speak. So
well, there is a Partners in Crime mug attached to this. This is a very serious and important matter. Put Brexit to one side. We've got to get this mug to the right person with the right suggestion.
Exactly. Yeah. We don't want to have to put a backstop in place, do we?
We certainly don't.
I had a look at some news this week. There are 3 things that jumped out at me. First of all, crime writer Claire McCleary was speaking ahead of her book launch recently in Scotland, and she mentioned that she thought there are too many tortured detectives out there. I wanted to get your thoughts on this because it is getting original. It's getting difficult to create original detectives, and I'm going to plead the fifth on this because I do have a couple of tortured detectives in my ranks. But I wanted to get your thoughts on that. The difficulties of creating original, compelling detectives without going down the kind of the
cliched route.
The divorced alcoholic route.
Well, my thoughts are that it's very, very difficult, as we've said. You know, there's the clichés are there for a reason, and let's get to the point that it's not just tortured detectives. There are many tortured people in real life. The fact that they, as Claire McCleary suggests, flood crime fiction is totally understandable. People write characters that people want to read, and maybe there's something about that. We all like an original insight into crime fiction. We all like a story told in a different way, but at the same time, there's a comfort in the cliche, reworked with a twist or what have you. I mean, you wouldn't be reading Poirot or any of the classic detectives without enjoying that aspect.
Well, the tropes work, don't they? That's kind of the whole point. I mean, it's something that Stuart Bache, the cover designer, has spoken about a couple of times on the show, that the fact that people expect a certain thing and they're actively looking for that. And there will be people who are looking for something a bit different, but on the whole, comfortable familiarity does sell.
Yeah, well, it does, and I think I don't know how you manage to avoid it. You just have to look to the best crime writers there are and trust that they may have tortured leading protagonists, but their particular approach to their characters is their own, and the details, background, and the stories they tell may be different. I mean, people who are just copying those sort of tropes and copying sort of maybe not such good writers, good enough, but not so good, may nick all sorts of ideas, and that's when it becomes a bit cliche. And there's nothing worse than actually picking up a book and saying, I've been here before. There's nothing worse than putting it on a television program or a film and going, I've seen this many, many times before. I think that tends to happen on television more than it does in books, but maybe it's because it's so much harder to get something on the screen than it is in print.
I mean, if tropes are done well, I think they can work remarkably well and be very compelling. So,
I mean, obviously she's got a point, a very good point, and well made. But there's so much good crime fiction out there. I mean, it's not a cry that I hear from many people, and it's not something I necessarily feel myself.
No.
There's so many different areas of crime fiction that you can enjoy, and so many writers bringing new things to the table, or taking old tropes and dressing them up in new clothes. So it's not something that I particularly worry about because of the sheer range of and quality of good crime writing out there.
Yeah. Well, Claire McCleary's new book, Runaway, was out last week, March the 14th. It carries the tagline, "Why did a woman with everything vanish?" So if you want to check that out, it's probably a good idea to head over to kobo.com. They've got millions and millions of ebooks and audiobooks available for your reading and listening pleasure. Now, if you're a new customer to Kobo, if you've not got a book from them before, then choose a book you'd like to read. Enter the promo code CRIME at the checkout and you'll get 90% off of that first purchase. But if you're an existing Kobo customer, or if you've claimed your 90% off, then enter the promo code PARTNERS and you get 40% off of all of your book purchases from Kobo for life.
For life.
For life. That makes it sound far more
Kobo's
definite.
Gift to us. How kind.
Well, another bit of news that I saw was, weirdly enough, in the TES, the Times Educational Supplement.
Ooh.
I came across this rather randomly, but just to kind of skim over the basis of the article. It's a head teacher who was being asked if strong leadership is enough or if more is needed in education. Now, what struck me was a little bit here, a quote from her right at the end of the article, which says, "I read a lot of novels, anything detective or crime. A lot of heads like crime fiction. I don't quite know why." So I wanted to put it to you, Bob, and to listeners as well. Why would school head teachers like crime fiction? There must be some comedy or a one-liner in there somewhere. Perhaps we should open that up to
Well,
the
if it
listeners.
is, it eludes me at the moment. I mean, maybe it's something to do with the fact that, as we mention very often, a lot of crime fiction is a puzzle. It's an investigation. It's setting out in search of answers. And maybe teachers can respond to that because that's what they teach. These are things that they want their pupils to learn. And if they're dealing with English literature or history or physics or whatever, they start with the facts, and they actually have to come and using formulas or what have you to certain answers. It's exactly the same sort of thing as a lot of detective crime. So I can understand the correlation, the connection between the work that teachers do, helping their pupils find answers, helping their pupils solve puzzles, and how that relates to what we do.
Well, I suppose crime fiction as well, we've spoken about this quite a lot on the show. It reflects society and the different cross-sections of society, and head teachers do see people from all walks of life and all cross-sections of society in their school, and the kids and the parents. So maybe that's something that appeals. Not very funny, though. That's the only problem. So if you do have perhaps a funny little witticism, a reason why school head teachers would like crime fiction, then do let us know on the Facebook page or the Partners in Crime Facebook group, or email hello@partnersincrime.online, and Twitter is Crime Fic Podcast.
Or you once had a French teacher called Miss Marple, or a Belgian teacher called Poirot.
Yes.
I don't know. Anyway.
Let's link it somehow. We can't,
desperate.
so over to you.
I was desperate. Right. Okay, well, thank you for thumping your gauntlet down on the table and asking me those questions. I've got one for you, really, and I don't know quite how to answer it. But I've been watching the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, the 8-part series on Netflix. And I don't really watch a lot of real crime, and I certainly don't read much real crime, not popular real crime. I read books on forensics and various other things which are helpful to the work.
Not true crime, though.
Not necessarily true crime, and as you have said very often, there is a huge market and great public interest in these true crime series. Now, I was watching the Madeleine McCann series, and with obviously a heavy heart, because it's such a tragic tale, as most true crimes are, but it's also a tragic tale that has no conclusion, and has, of course, had no conclusion now for many, many, many years. And it's an incredibly painful story. And at the end of it, I felt, should I be watching this? I mean, I am a parent, and of course the Madeleine McCann disappearance is every parent's worst nightmare. But I felt, should I really be watching this? I felt very, very uncomfortable. So it was quite interesting this morning to read Lucy Mangan in The Guardian, who actually lays into the series for all sorts of reasons, one of them being, why have they done it in the first place? I mean, she comes to the conclusion that... I think she says something along the lines of, here it is, it's a feat of sorts, I suppose, to create something so morally and creatively bankrupt that your viewers would gain more insight into your case if they were to sit alone in a darkened room for 10 minutes to try to fathom the depths of parental anguish, then, now, and for the more than a decade in between. When the urge came upon the makers to put this series together, they should have done the same. And this is followed up by another article by another terrific writer, Rick Samander, who actually lays into the whole fashion for real crime. And he has he says that there's a new Heat magazine, for instance, is bringing out a new magazine dedicated to real crime, and he comes to his own conclusions on this. We listen to true crime stories as an escapist thrill, but they delude us to the true nature of most crime. Some of my friends now semi-seriously count themselves experts on DNA collection, or spin elaborate fantasies about how they would get away with their own very bad thing. They think they are clued up on the red flags of potential murderers. Brian in compliance. Keep an eye on him, they wink. Now that they are bored of diagnosing people as psychopaths after reading the John Ronson book. So this is a real pushback about a sort of quite a phenomenon, certainly in media world, where there is this obsession. Now, I thought, well, I'm a crime writer. I write about murders and investigations and crime and terrible people. I read books. We recommend books every week about terrible stories and what have you. And they're fiction. The question I have to some degree is, why am I so upset by real fiction and not upset by, in the same way, with
real crime?
Real crime, and not so upset with crime fiction? And is it a delusion? Am I just kidding myself, or am I protected? Am I protected by the fact, protected by the very word fiction?
Well, yeah, I think we all are, aren't we? It's something we've touched on a few times before. And every time a new series comes out, we had the Ted Bundy tapes recently on Netflix. We mentioned that, didn't we? There was another series not long before that. I can't remember which one it was, but yeah, it came up again. Is it a form of voyeurism to be looking at true crime in this way, and to be not idolising the serial killers, but putting them up on this kind of pedestal?
Well, and how sick are people? Sorry to interrupt, but I think it is Netflix had to put out a statement about the Ted Bundy thing, because people were posting on social media that they fancied him. They thought it was, and it was, as Kenny Everett would have said, in the worst possible taste. So is it a
TV version of rubbernecking at a car accident?
Well,
slowing down and taking photos and that kind of.
Absolutely, you can't can't help yourself but look, and after you've looked, you hate yourself for looking. I don't know, but how does that apply to crime fiction? I hope I'm not shooting ourselves in the foot here, but it's an interesting.
I suppose with fiction, you know that nobody's been harmed apart from fictional characters that have been invented in somebody's head, and of course they don't exist. They don't have sentience, and they, you don't feel guilty. I suppose.
So you feel one removed.
Yeah.
From the actual reality of the things that are being described. I don't know. It's an interesting moral dilemma for some people, but not for most, because crime fiction and real crime remains one of the most popular subjects amongst the public worldwide. So,
well, on the note of making the dark much lighter, something else I saw in the news this week was Alexander McCall Smith. He is releasing a new series based on the Scandi noir fictional world of sort of dark Scandinavian crime that we've seen over the last sort of 10-15 years or so really exploding. He starts a new series which he describes as Scandi Blanc.
Right.
Which it's set in Malmo, following Ulf Varg, a Swedish detective who, I quote, prefers a night in with his dog to an all-night bender. It's generally, if you know Alexander McCall Smith's books, you'll know they're kind of light-hearted mysteries. And yes, he's described his unique approach to Scandi noir genre as Scandi Blanc. He says it's Scandinavian crime fiction without much crime and without any bodies.
Oh, so is that the way he's dealing with it, with the thing I've just brought up? I mean, that's segued quite well into that.
So basically, it's he's just setting a series of novels in Sweden, but without them.
No bodies and very little crime.
Yes, indeed. And what I quite like is the first Detective Varg novel is called The Department of Sensitive Crimes, and Alexander McCall Smith's name has a little umlaut over the A there for no reason at all, other than the fact it's been set in Sweden.
And why has he done that? Does he actually just say? I mean, why has he? Is it a reaction to the trend, certainly over recent years of very hard hitting descriptions of violence in crime fiction? In
I
books?
guess so. Yeah, I mean, Number One Ladies Detective Agency, for example, wasn't exactly massively gritty or noir, and yeah, it's the style of writing he does, I suppose, and he's perhaps jumping on the trend there, but making it his own thing.
Super cosy.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah, nice cosy kind of mysteries set in Sweden. So that's out actually in hardback now. That was published on the 7th of March. Now he is quoted as saying at the end of this article, "I suffer from this serial novelism condition. The symptoms are that you write serial novels, there's no known cure, and then you die. That's the way it works." It's very Alexander McCall Smith.
Yeah,
like the whole story, the whole concept. So yeah, I thought I'd throw that in as a nice, light-hearted addition to this
Department of Sensitive Crimes.
Yes,
that's a great title as well.
Yes,
isn't it? Oh, hello. There
we go. We've got our first caller.
That's no, it's my brother. Sorry, Moo, if you actually listen to this at the end of the week, I would have answered it by now. But in the meantime, he's ringing away. God bless him.
I thought we had our first phone-in. But it might be Alexander McCall Smith ringing up to put us right. Now, I did mention on last week's show that I had been watching Cheat, the ITV series about a student who is accused of cheating on a paper that she submits at university, and then goes on to try and ruin the life of the lecturer who fails her for it. I said that I felt perhaps the characters were a bit kind of flat and two-dimensional, that the motivations were weak. My opinion of it has improved. I watched the second and third episodes last night.
I can hear a collective sigh of ITV executives saying, "Croft likes it. Thank goodness for that."
Yeah, maybe is it like the Delia effect? And yeah, kind of other than she's a psychopath and someone stained her character, so that's how she responds. I was kind of struggling to find another motivation for this character, but I think what was revealed in the third episode, I think, does kind of answer that. I wonder if it was a little contrived. I'm not quite seeing how that all pieces together. It does seem a little convenient. I'm wording this in a way that anybody who has seen it will know what I'm talking about, and I'm not spoiling it for people who haven't at the same time. The motivations do go much deeper now, and it was better than it seemed at first. It's a bit of a slow burn, but I think still a little bit contrived for my liking. I'm going to watch the fourth episode because they are getting better, and I'll see where we go from there. But I wanted to give you an update.
Well, good.
Sheets.
Thank you very much for that. I've not seen it, so I can't comment. But I do think that something that tends to happen in the UK that doesn't happen in other countries, certainly not with Scandinoir, and certainly not in America, is that the scope that they give their crime series is far longer. I'm not talking about a different story every week. I'm talking about things like The Bridge. I'm talking things, the Big Detectives series in the States and what have you. They tend to run for at least 12, sometimes more. I mean, the scope of their stories, it's the difference between being a sort of like a novella and a full novel, which I think gives a huge amount of scope to tell these extraordinary tales. In this country, there's this sort of thing, and I'm sure someone will say it's money, and I hope it's not a sense that the British public won't actually stay with a programme for longer than 3 or 2 or 6 episodes. I mean, 6 seems to be the top, doesn't it? Occasionally, very occasionally, 8 episodes. So I sometimes think, do our writers and producers actually have to tell stories in too short a time, that they haven't got the range, the time and backing to do bigger stories, more on many different levels? So occasionally they just seem a little sort of compact, and don't seem to have the great richness that some of the foreign products have.
I kind of like that, though. I mean, I'm a short form writer myself. My novels are on the shorter end of things, definitely. So I think I like the pacing of what we get over here. And I think with 4 episodes, I think you could have packed a lot in. But actually, Cheat, I found, was really quite kind of slow and contrived, especially for 4 episodes. I think that's the kind of storyline that you could easily get a 6-parter out of if it was done right. But I don't know. It just
but it's interesting you say 6-parter. I mean, if you say that in the States, they'll go, "What? No, this is going to be 13." If you say it, obviously, all the most successful. I mean, look at.
Don't forget, in the States, there's adverts all over the programme, so you've probably got the same amount of content over 13 US episodes, and you have 6 over here.
Yeah, have you watched Sky recently? I mean, it's I mean, I understand what you're saying, but basically, I mean, I can't think of any series in recent time over here that has actually stretched beyond 6 or 8 episodes to become epic stories in the manner of many foreign equivalents. I just mention it, not out of any real judgment at all, but I just think, well, you know, what would you be like if you were a writer and you had the range to or work with other writers to create a series? Would it be a many texture thing? Would it be more ambitious in its scope? Which is not to say that British product isn't. It's absolutely terrific, and the best of it is up there with the best of it. But it seems to be a pattern of the way we make our programmes. They seem to be in shorter form.
Yeah, I suppose it's a cultural difference, isn't it? And talking about cultural differences, the book that I've been reading recently...
I think it's money, actually.
Well, yeah, there is that. Talking of cultural differences, a book that I've been reading recently is, I guess, crimey, not in the kind of detective crime thing, but as we keep saying, we are a broad church here on Partners in Crime. I've been reading the what I believe is the latest Robert Harris book, Munich. Yeah. Now, I happen to know you're a big Robert Harris fan. You've read every word he's written.
I am a huge Robert Harris fan, and I'm halfway through Munich myself, and it's very much my cup of tea. I mean, it's an extraordinary period in British history and in world history, indeed. And as ever, he has his own spin on it, and he's a terrific writer. So whenever one of his books comes out, I'm first up there to get it, and Munich is no exception. Anyway.
Yeah,
What are your
no.
thoughts?
Well, it's set in September 1938, and it's kind of at the heart of British government and also German government as well. At the time when Hitler was looking to invade Czechoslovakia, and the British government, headed by Neville Chamberlain, were looking to
Appease.
to avoid another war 20 years after the First World War, or the Great War, as it was then, because the second one hadn't started. Yes, crime links, I guess so. It's a thriller, without any doubt. It's a thriller, and I guess it counts as crime because what bigger crime than Hitler's. It is a remarkable book. It's very, very interesting. I was saying to you off air last week, but wasn't I? The issue that I have with historical crime is I love to read non-fiction. I love to read about political history and what have you. I love to read fiction. When they're blended, I don't know which bits actually happened and which didn't, and I don't want to make a fool of myself in a pub in a few weeks' time by giving out some facts about Chamberlain's appeasement that didn't actually happen.
I think the basic facts remain the same, unless you're looking at a book by look at Fatherland, which was Robert Harris's first big hit, which is of course completely fictional, based on the fact that Hitler actually won the war and invaded Britain and what have you. That's so he can make up historical facts up to the point, up to a certain point anyway. But I think certainly with Harris that he sticks pretty rigidly to historical fact. I think he has to, but with historical novels, it is the sort of the characters, the situations, and the particular stories within the historical scope that good writers manage to explore. And it's the personal things. I mean, in Munich, for instance, a fascinating scene set in the Ritz. And I won't spoil it for you, but it's brilliant, the detail, the characters, and it goes in a way that you're not expecting it to go, and he's setting up his characters, who of course are fictional. They are his creation, and he's done the classic thing, which of course every writer has to do. What if in this particular time when the world was on the brink of a Second World War, and things were at such a pitch that some people were doing everything to stop a war, and other people were actually actively sort of trying to get closer. Obviously Hitler was trying to take as much as he possibly could and create war. But what happens with this set of characters with these personal problems? How do they respond to this historical situation? What are their lives like? And especially, as Harris does, he says, what if they are principal people with a point of view who are actively working historically to actually achieve something, and we follow their particular story about how they succeed in what they want to do, how they succeed emotionally, how they succeed professionally, or whatever. That's where the stories actually are. And so he does make up his own puzzles, but very much, I think, within an authentic historical background. And I think his research is as with all the best historical novelists, is usually incredibly fine.
Well, I'm looking forward to finishing that. If that tickles your fancy, then why not head over to kobo.com and grab a copy of Robert Harris's Munich. If you're a new customer to Kobo, then enter the promo code CRIME at the checkout to get 90% off. And if you're an existing customer, you can use the promo code PARTNERS to get 40% off of all of your Kobo purchases moving forward. You don't need an e-reader or anything like that either. You can download the free Kobo app for your mobile phone, for your tablet, and with ebooks generally being a lot cheaper anyway, and with 40% off, you're looking at getting a book for probably £1 or £2, which is
all right,
which is criminally good.
And if it's a good book, it's even better.
Exactly, yes. So that's exclusive to Partners in Crime listeners as well. So do go and grab that. Thank you to the folk at Kobo.
Well, I've got one quick book recommendation, really. Lovers of Helen Fitzgerald's Viral, which was a big hit and turned into a television series, will be looking forward to the recently Renda, the wonderful Karen Sullivan at Renda, is now publishing Helen Fitzgerald's latest book, which is called Worst Case Scenario. It's a deliciously dark, unapologetically funny psychological thriller by the international best-selling author of The Cry. The harrowing plot keeps you gripped until the final devastating revelation. Mary Shields is a moody, acerbic probation officer dealing with some of Glasgow's worst cases, and her job is on the line. Liam McDowell was imprisoned for murdering his wife, and he's published a series of letters to the dead woman in a book that makes him an unlikely hero. And a poster boy for men's rights activists, Liam is released on licence into Mary's care, but things are far from simple. Mary develops a poisonous obsession with Liam and his world, and when her son and Liam's daughter form a relationship, Mary will stop at nothing to impose her own brand of justice, with devastating consequences. A heart-pounding, relentless and chilling psychological thriller, rich with deliciously dark and unapologetic humour, Worst Case Scenario is also a perceptive, tragic and hugely relevant book by one of the most exciting names in crime fiction. So that is Worst Case Scenario by Helen Fitzgerald, published by Arenda and available on Kobo.
Lovely. Well, I think that will pretty much do for this week.
Yeah, been quite a serious one this week, hasn't it?
We've
really
rattled through a lot, actually, haven't we?
Yeah.
And it was pretty much all crime related, which is really odd.
We got to sort that out. That's a totally unbalanced Partners in Crime episode. If that's the case.
Yeah, we need to get back to talking about something completely unrelated to crime next week, or people who wonder what's happened to us.
And as they used to say on Monty Python, and now for something completely different.
Partners in Crime was presented by Adam Croft and Robert Dawes and produced by Adam Croft. The theme tune was by the Caesareans. The Partners in Crime logo and imagery were designed by Stuart Beisch. Partners in Crime is sponsored by Kobo, your favourite local bookshop, perfected.